Oh, your overhead storage channel, let's go listening.
I wasn't even thinking about home when I unlocked the front door that Sunday evening. My flight landed early, the car rental return was smoother than usual, and the drive back from the airport gave me just enough time to decompress from the last 48 hours of back-to-back meetings, stale coffee, and stiff hotel sheets. All I wanted was a shower, a home-cooked meal, or hell, even leftovers, and to sleep in my own bed again next to my wife. But the second I stepped inside, something felt different. Not wrong exactly, just off. You know that subtle shift in the air when you walk into a room where something's been moved, even if you can't say what? That was the feeling. The place looked exactly how I'd left it. Neat, familiar, maybe too familiar. That in itself should have comforted me. The walls were the same muted gray we picked out 2 years ago. The couch still had the indent from where Haley always curled up with her blanket, and the soft hum of the fridge in the kitchen was the only real sound. Still, something in the air felt unnatural. I closed the door behind me slowly, dropped my duffel by the entry table, and stood there for a second longer than I normally would have. I took a deep breath, and that's when I noticed it. Faint, but distinct. A scent I couldn't place right away. Not bad, not offensive, just unfamiliar, masculine, sharp. It wasn't my deodorant. It wasn't my cologne. Hell, it wasn't anything I recognized. I furrowed my brow, trying to justify it to myself. Maybe one of her friends had stopped by. Maybe she'd been cleaning with something new. Maybe, I don't know. I wasn't trying to jump to conclusions. But the closer I got to our bedroom, the stronger it became. That scent. And then I stepped inside. The bed was made, but not well. Not the way Haley usually does it. The sheets were pulled too tightly on her side and half tucked on mine, like someone had straightened them quickly without much care. My pillow looked used, flat. There was a faint crease along the edge of the duvet like someone had been lying there recently. And sitting on my nightstand, not hers, mine, was a wine glass. A stemless one, dark and heavy at the base. Not from our kitchen set. I picked it up slowly, turning it over in my hand. There was a faint red stain dried to the bottom, like someone had poured a full glass and left the dregs behind. I sniffed it. Pinot, maybe. We didn't have any open bottles before I left. That odd scent in the air was even more concentrated now. I sniffed the glass again. No, the cologne wasn't on it. It was lingering in the room itself. In the sheets. The air. My pillow. I stepped over to the laundry hamper in the corner, already half guessing what I'd find. Sure enough, there was a damp towel near the top. Not a bath towel either. One of the smaller ones I used at the gym. I picked it up, hesitated, and smelled it. Same scent. Not mine. And not Haley's. My mind started racing, but I hadn't even heard the garage door or the sound of her keys yet. She wasn't home. I was alone with all of this. The clues, the lingering scent, and the knot slowly tightening in my stomach. That's when I heard it. The soft creak of the back door opening and then closing. A beat later, her voice echoed down the hall, light and casual. "Babe, you're back?" I tried to swallow the tension rising in my throat. "Yeah," I called out, keeping my voice steady. Flight got moved up. No delays for once. Her footsteps padded closer, and a second later she appeared in the doorway. Haley looked the same as always, leggings, hoodie, hair tied in a messy bun. She was holding her phone in one hand, car keys in the other. There was a sheen of sweat on her forehead like she'd just finished a jog. Or maybe she'd just come from somewhere else entirely. She smiled when she saw me, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I thought you weren't getting in until after 9, she said, setting her keys in the dish on the dresser. "They switched things around last minute," I replied. "Got lucky with an early checkout." She nodded. "Well, good surprise then." Her eyes flicked toward the wine glass on the nightstand. Just for a second. A blink. Then back to me. "You look tired. Want me to start dinner?" I hesitated. My instincts told me to press her right then and there, but I held back. "Actually, did someone stop by while I was gone?" She tilted her head. "What? No. Why?" I gestured toward the nightstand. "Just, that glass wasn't there before, and the bed looks like it's been used. And I trailed off, realizing how paranoid I sounded. It's probably nothing. Her laugh was quick, almost too quick, and light like I just said something absurd. Oh my God, Jake. I cleaned in here yesterday. I probably sprayed too much Febreze or something. Febreze, I echoed. She stepped forward, kissed my cheek, and brushed past me into the hallway. You're tired. You always get weird when you travel. Come on, let's eat. I'll heat up the pasta from yesterday. I didn't move right away. I just stood there. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But the smell wasn't Febreze. And that glass didn't come from our kitchen. And that towel? That wasn't a cleaning towel. That was a body towel. As I stood in the bedroom, alone now, her voice echoed from the kitchen. She was humming. Humming. I walked over to the window and pulled it open, letting the cool evening air push out the heavy scent that still lingered around me. I needed to clear my head. I needed to not lose it. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe I'd forgotten we bought new glasses. Maybe she really did just clean the bedroom. But the scent clung to everything. That night, I lay next to Haley in the dark, wide awake while she slept like nothing was wrong. The ceiling fan spun lazily above us, its faint ticking the only sound in the room. Her breathing was soft and even, calm, peaceful. Mine wasn't. My chest felt tight, like something heavy was sitting on it. I closed my eyes and tried to force sleep to come, but it was like my brain had been waiting for this silence, this stillness, to start pulling things apart. One thought kept circling in my head. When did things start to feel different? It's easy to convince yourself that nothing's wrong when the signs are spread out over time. One little weird thing, you brush it off. Two, still coincidence. But lying there, every detail I'd ignored started resurfacing with uncomfortable clarity. There was the night I saw her phone light up at 1:17 a.m. Face down, as always. I hadn't meant to look. I was half asleep, and the sudden glow just caught my eye. But I saw her flinch. She picked it up too fast, like she was expecting it, like she didn't want me to see it. When I asked who it was, she smiled and said, "Group chat. You know how the girls are." But when she handed me the phone to prove it, the thread was empty. Not a single message. Just the name of the group and nothing else underneath. I remember thinking, maybe she deleted it? But who deletes an entire chat thread that quickly unless they need to? I let it go. I didn't want to be that guy, the insecure, suspicious husband who couldn't trust his wife. We'd always promised we wouldn't be that couple. The kind who snoops. The kind who interrogates. I believed trust was earned, and I thought we'd earned it. So I told myself it was fine. But it wasn't just that. There were the nights she started going out more. Girls' nights, she called them. "We're overdue for some wine and event session," she'd say, kissing me on the forehead as she left in heels she hadn't worn in months. The first few times I didn't think much of it. But then it became a pattern. Every Friday night, always dressed up, always wearing perfume she never used around the house. I'd text her around 10 to check in, and she'd respond hours later, saying she was about to head home. Except sometimes she didn't get back until 2 in the morning. I once joked, "These girls' nights are starting to sound more like secret missions." She laughed, wrapped her arms around my neck, and said, "You're so dramatic," before brushing it off with a kiss. That should have felt comforting. Didn't. Then there was the sudden attention to her appearance. Now, don't get me wrong. Haley had always taken care of herself. But this was different. A new gym membership she didn't talk about. Brand new lingerie tags I found in the bathroom trash. Salon appointments popping up on our shared calendar labeled vaguely as self-care. I even caught her changing the bedsheets at 10 a.m. on a random Tuesday when I came home early for lunch. I asked her why, and she looked surprised to see me. Said she spilled coffee that morning. But there hadn't been any coffee on the floor, in the laundry, or anywhere else. Still, I let it slide. Because that's what you do when you love someone, right? You give them the benefit of the doubt. You assume there's a reasonable explanation, and you don't want to be the person who questions everything. You want to believe you're just being tired or overworked or maybe just a little off your game. But now I couldn't stop rewinding everything. One morning a few weeks ago, she came out of the shower humming. She wrapped herself in a towel and leaned against the doorframe, scrolling through her phone like she hadn't a care in the world. I kissed her shoulder and asked if she wanted pancakes. She smiled, distracted, and said, "Sure, babe." I remember catching a glimpse of a message on her screen. It was just a name, M. That was it. Not Mom, not Maddie, not anyone I recognized. The preview line underneath was something vague. Something like "last night was," before she locked the screen. That one stuck with me. I asked about it casually later, pretending like it was nothing. "Hey, who's M?" And she didn't even flinch. "Megan from yoga." Why? I didn't have a good answer. So I just said, "No reason," and moved on. But Megan from yoga doesn't text at 6 a.m. about last night. And now I was remembering other things too. Little fractures in our routine. She used to check in with me during my work trips. Sweet little "miss you" texts or the occasional video call. But on this trip, barely a word. She'd responded to 2 of my messages with short replies. No calls. When I asked if she wanted to FaceTime, she said she had a headache. Now that I thought about it, the only time she actually messaged me first was to ask when I'd be getting home. And I was starting to realize something I didn't want to admit. I hadn't felt truly connected to her in months. We still went through the motions, dinners, grocery runs, Sunday mornings watching home improvement shows. But something about her had felt miles away. Like she was in the room, but her mind was elsewhere. And I let myself believe that was normal. I turned my head and looked at her. She was curled toward the window, one hand tucked under the pillow, the rise and fall of her breath steady and sure. I wondered how many nights she had slept like that while I was away. Peaceful, unbothered. Did she look this relaxed the night before I got home? I reached out, then stopped. My hand hovered near her back, close enough to feel the heat of her skin through her shirt. I wanted to touch her, to feel that familiar closeness. But something inside me hesitated. I pulled my hand back. The longer I stared at the ceiling, the more my doubts turned into patterns. Patterns I hadn't seen before, or hadn't wanted to, because if I acknowledged them, I'd have to confront the idea that the woman I loved, the woman I built a life with, might not be the person I thought she was anymore. I hated that thought. Hated it so much I tried to push it away. But it was like trying to hold back the tide with my bare hands. By 3 a.m., I hadn't moved. By 4, I gave up trying to sleep. I got up, padded barefoot to the kitchen, and made a pot of coffee I didn't even want. I stared out the window while it brewed, watching the moonlight spill over the lawn. The wine glass was still in the sink, the towel still in the hamper, and the scent? Fainter now, but it was still there. A week passed. 7 days of pretending. 7 days of telling myself that I needed to be sure before I said anything. 7 days of smiling through conversations I wasn't really part of, playing the role of the loving husband while a silent war was building behind my eyes. Haley hadn't changed, at least not on the surface. She still kissed me goodbye in the morning, still sent the occasional "thinking of you" text, still sat beside me on the couch while we watched shows neither of us really paid attention to. She laughed at the same commercials. She asked me if I wanted takeout on Wednesday night like always. Her world was intact, or so she thought. But behind the curtain I was watching. Quietly, carefully. I didn't want to be wrong. I wanted nothing more than to be the overthinking guy who misread everything and had to apologize for it later. God, I would have welcomed that. But deep down I knew I wouldn't get that relief. Not this time. Something had shifted between us. And it wasn't just distance or routine. It was her. And the more I tried to hold on to what we were, the more I saw what we weren't anymore. Then came the envelope. It showed up on a Thursday afternoon, forwarded from our old address in Raleigh. We'd lived in that townhouse during our first 3 years of marriage. A tiny 2-bedroom with creaky floors and cabinets that didn't shut all the way. We moved out almost a year ago, so mail from there was rare now, usually junk or some subscription we forgot to cancel. But this wasn't junk. I almost didn't open it. The envelope was plain. No return label. The only thing on it was our names, both printed neatly across the front. Not even typed, written. My name. and hers. Inside was a single folded page. A hotel invoice. At first, I skimmed it, not fully registering what I was looking at. The logo at the top was for a boutique hotel in Charleston. I'd been to Charleston once, years ago, for a friend's wedding. Haley and I had always said we'd go back one day. But the dates stopped me cold. 3 weekends ago. She was supposed to be on a girls' trip then. Said she and Megan were heading up the coast for a little escape. Wine, books, and bad movies, she texted, with a winking emoji. She sent me a few pictures. Group sh*ts of the beach, cocktails, nothing too specific. It seemed legit, but the receipt said otherwise. 2 nights in a premium suite. 1 room, 2 guests, and under the primary guest, Haley Carson. Below that, a second name, Mark Evans. I stared at it for a long time, like maybe it would change if I blinked hard enough. But it didn't. Mark Evans. That name meant something. Took a second, then it clicked. Mark was a guy she'd mentioned before. Just once or twice. She worked with him. Finance side of her firm. She always referred to him with this weird tone. Dismissive. Almost irritated. Mark from accounting, she'd say with an eye roll. Guy thinks he's slick but couldn't charm a vending machine. So why was she sharing a hotel suite with him? My hands trembled as I turned the page over. On the back, in handwriting I didn't recognize, blocky, rushed, were 4 words. Next trip, NYC? I stood there at the kitchen counter, the paper crinkling between my fingers. I must have read it 10 times. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to admit that this was real. That the paranoia I'd been wrestling with wasn't just in my head. That all the signs, all the late nights and vague answers and strange silences had been leading to this exact moment. I sat down. For a few minutes, I didn't move. I just stared at the paper while the coffee machine hummed in the background and the dog barked at something outside. The world around me was still spinning like nothing had changed. But everything had. It wasn't suspicion anymore. It was confirmation. And it hit me harder than I thought it would. I always figured that if I ever found proof, if the truth actually slapped me in the face, I'd feel rage. I'd want to yell or throw something or demand answers on the spot. But instead, what I felt was something colder, quieter, like the air had been *ked out of the room, like I was watching my life from behind glass. I looked around at our house, the framed photos of us on the entryway table, the Mr. and Mrs. Pillow still sitting on the armchair, the half-finished puzzle on the coffee table we started 2 Sundays ago, when she insisted we needed more slow time. It all looked like a museum exhibit now. A display of a marriage that had already ended. I just hadn't caught up yet. That evening, I didn't say anything. When she came home from her so-called networking dinner, hair curled, heels in hand, I was already sitting on the couch. She gave me the same practiced smile, leaned down to kiss me like nothing was different. "You're quiet," she said, dropping her purse by the door. "Tired," I replied. She nodded, walked barefoot into the kitchen, and asked if I wanted tea. I said sure. And then I watched her move through the kitchen, humming to herself, completely unaware that her world had shifted, that the illusion was breaking, that I knew. I didn't confront her that night. Not yet. I needed to think, to breathe, to figure out what came next. Because now that the lie was exposed, the real question wasn't if she'd been unfaithful. It was how long she thought she could keep getting away with it. Haley filed for alimony a month after I found the hotel receipt. By that time, I hadn't said a word about what I knew. I kept everything quiet. Not because I was afraid of confrontation, but because I wanted her to reveal just how far she was willing to go. And she didn't disappoint. She thought she had the upper hand. She moved with confidence. Her voice still syrupy sweet when she reminded me we needed to talk finances. She spoke like a woman already standing on the other side of the divorce, the winner of a game I didn't even know we'd started. She never asked why I wasn't pushing back. She mistook my silence for defeat. What she didn't know was that every day since I found that envelope, I'd been building my own case, piece by piece. I spoke to a lawyer, quietly hired a private investigator, started requesting financial records and combing through joint accounts, which she must have thought I never looked at. The puzzle started forming fast. Unauthorized withdrawals. Transfers to a business consultant with no clear connection to her firm. A forged signature on a refinance agreement for our cabin property upstate, the one I inherited from my grandfather. The same cabin she swore she didn't want any legal claim to when we first married. And then came the DNA results. That's a whole story on its own. The test, the conversation that triggered it, the uneasy math that had been gnawing at me. Let's just say it wasn't paranoia. It was proof. A very expensive, very cold confirmation that made my stomach turn the moment I read it. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I waited for the papers. And when they came, served to me at work like a message in bold font, I played the part. Nodded. Signed for them. Took the file home and read it in full while Haley sat in the next room watching one of those courtroom reality shows she loved so much. It asked for everything. Primary ownership of the house. A vehicle that was legally in my name. $10,000 per month in spousal support. Her tone didn't even change when we spoke about it that evening. She was calm. Smug even. She said things like, "I know this is hard, Jake. And we'll both come out of this okay if we keep things civil." She leaned on buzzwords like fair division and lifestyle continuity. She actually used that phrase. Lifestyle continuity. I wanted to laugh. She thought she'd crafted the perfect narrative. A woman stepping out of a one-sided marriage, reclaiming her independence, asking only for what she deserved. She believed I'd be too proud, too emotionally broken to fight back. She didn't understand that I wasn't broken. I was wide awake. When the first court hearing was scheduled, I said little. Let her think I'd be unprepared, that I'd show up alone, confused, and cooperative. Instead, I walked in with my attorney and handed the judge a sealed folder. Inside was everything. The receipt from Charleston, the bank statements, the forged documents, notarized proof that her signature overlays were fraudulent. And the DNA test, the one that proved the child she claimed wasn't mine, truly wasn't. Haley hadn't even mentioned the child in her paperwork. I think she was trying to decide how to spin it, keep it out of legal channels until she could find a story that worked. But I beat her to it. When the judge opened the file and began reading, Haley's posture changed. It was subtle at first, the stiffening of her shoulders, the tightening grip on her pen. Then came the rapid blinking, the glances toward her lawyer. Her fingers twitched, tugging at the cuff of her blazer, like she couldn't get comfortable anymore. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of pages turning. And then came the questions. Her attorney leaned in and whispered something to her. She nodded, but her expression was blank. This wasn't the plan. She had expected resistance, sure, but not this. Not documented, time-stamped, professionally bound evidence with notarized signatures and dates she couldn't wiggle around. The judge paused, then spoke. "We're placing a temporary freeze on joint assets until further investigation is complete." Just like that, the narrative slipped from her hands. The story she'd built, the confident, betrayed wife seeking justice, began to crumble in real time. And she knew it. You could see it in the way her breathing changed. She stopped making eye contact with me, stopped correcting her lawyer when he fumbled her timeline. She'd stepped into that courtroom thinking she had everything. But the truth doesn't need to yell to be loud. It just needs to exist. That evening, back at the house, she was silent. Not in the cold, punishing way she used to get after arguments, but in the stunned, calculating way of someone realizing she misread the board. The queen had moved too early. The king hadn't been asleep. He'd been watching. She asked if we could talk. I said no. She asked if I wanted tea. I said nothing. She sat at the kitchen table with her hands in her lap, eyes darting toward me every few seconds, trying to gauge what I might do next. But I didn't speak, because I didn't need to. She had revealed her hand. And now it was her turn to sit in the silence she once asked me to live with. It didn't take long after the hearing for the fallout to spread. 1 week. That's all it took. 7 days after the courtroom blindsided her. Haley's confident facade cracked in places she couldn't patch. The money she thought she'd lean on was frozen. Her attorney, once firm and poised, now advised strategic restraint, which I'm pretty sure was code for we're losing ground. And the private calls she used to take in the hallway? They became longer. Hushed. Panicked. That's when Mark disappeared. I wasn't surprised. The kind of man who sneaks around with someone else's wife doesn't exactly scream ride or die. But even I didn't expect him to vanish as fast as he did. No warning. No goodbyes. Just gone. I found out through a mutual contact. Someone I used to work with before Haley pulled me into her firm's networking circle. He sent me a simple message. FYI, Mark's office is clearing out his desk. Heard internal audit found something. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The pieces were falling exactly where they were supposed to. Haley found out that same night. I was in the garage, clearing out old boxes from the overhead racks, when I heard the front door slam. Not close slam. A pause. Then the unmistakable clatter of her keys skidding across the kitchen tile. She didn't say anything at first. Just stood in the hallway, breathing hard like she'd run from the car. Her phone was in her hand, screen still glowing. She looked at me like I was the only person in the world left to talk to. "Did you know?" she asked, voice tight. I wiped my hands on a rag. "Know what?" "About Mark." I shrugged. "Depends. What about him?" She scoffed, spun in a slow, frustrated circle like she was trying to decide whether to explode or break down. "He's not answering me," she said, almost to herself. "He's not returning calls. His number's disconnected. His apartment." Her voice caught. "He's gone." I leaned against the workbench. Weird. Didn't he once say he hated people who ghosted? She glared at me, but the anger didn't hold. It slipped away as fast as it came. What replaced it was something else entirely. Panic. She pulled out a chair and sat down like her knees couldn't hold her anymore. "They're opening a formal case," she said softly. "Internal financial fraud. He was using dummy contracts, falsifying budget lines. I don't know how much they know about me." I didn't answer, because I did know. I knew that Mark had cut a deal. I knew he handed over chat logs, emails, even *TS of wire transfers that went through our shared family account. Transfers Haley authorized while I was on business trips or distracted with other responsibilities. The Charleston Hotel? She paid for it with an investment account my father had set up for us before he passed. That was the part that hit me the hardest, if I'm honest. It wasn't just the betrayal of trust. It was the betrayal of legacy. She used the money my dad left us, meant to fund our first child's future, or pay for the lake house renovations, or keep us afloat if anything ever went wrong, and spent it on a getaway with another man. And now that man was gone. Just like that. Mark had no loyalty, no plan to stay and face the music. He gave the investigators what they wanted and slipped out before Haley even knew she was standing alone. And it hit her hard. That night she didn't make dinner, didn't turn on the TV, didn't ask to talk. She just sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through old messages on her phone, watching the read receipts stop showing up, watching silence become permanent. The next morning she tried to spin it. "He didn't tell me everything," she said while pouring herself coffee. Her tone clipped, like she was convincing herself more than me. "He manipulated me. I was just collateral. I didn't know what he was doing with the accounts." I looked up from my laptop. "You transferred funds from our joint savings." "That wasn't—" She stopped herself. "I didn't realize. He said it was a temporary adjustment." "And you forged my signature." That landed. She didn't respond, just stared at her mug like it might answer for her. Later that week, her attorney called to request a meeting off the record. My lawyer said sure. We met in a quiet conference room downtown. She came in looking tired, thinner, hair pulled into a bun, makeup barely touched. No eye contact. Her lawyer cleared his throat. "Ms. Carson would like to propose a settlement. Something private, more controlled, to avoid public exposure and extended litigation." I leaned back. She didn't seem worried about exposure when she filed for 10 grand a month. Her lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "There have been developments." "Yeah," I interrupted. "I'm aware." I reached into my folder and slid a printout across the table. A copy of one of the email threads Mark turned over. Haley's name at the top. Her tone flirty, transactional. A clear outline of how to conceal funds in third-party accounts. Her face went pale. I stood. This meeting's over. By the time we got home, she wasn't wearing the mask anymore. She walked straight to the guest room, shut the door behind her, and didn't come out for the rest of the night. Over the following days, she tried to reach out. Not to explain, that part was done. She knew there were no more good explanations left. What she wanted was stability, reassurance, any hint that someone somewhere was still on her side. But that someone was gone. Mark was the safety net, the plan B, the future she thought she'd built in secret. And he'd abandoned it the moment it stopped serving him. I heard from my investigator a few days later. Mark was in Connecticut, living under a family trust. No forwarding address, no public employment. But he's cooperating, the investigator said. His lawyer submitted a statement. Claims Haley was the one who initiated the fake consultant payments. He gave them access to all their digital conversations, even the ones she deleted. I nodded. Send me everything. When the full archive arrived, I spent 3 nights going through it. It wasn't just the affair. It was the planning, the manipulation, the lies built with care and repetition. She'd spent months softening the ground, painting me as distant, unavailable, cold. So when she made her move, she could justify it. It didn't matter that none of it was true. It only mattered that she believed it enough to act. And now, her co-conspirator had become a witness, and she had no one left to hide behind. Haley's world unraveled fast. Once Mark turned over their messages, investigators had enough to open a formal case. Fraud, forgery, and financial misrepresentation. Her access to our accounts was frozen. Her name flagged in internal reviews at her firm. She tried to control the narrative, posting vague quotes, sharing photos of starting over, even hinting online that I'd been cold and controlling. But the truth didn't need to shout. The documents spoke louder than hashtags ever could. Friends who once rallied behind her stopped replying. Even her family grew distant. She sent me emails, long, pleading ones. Some angry, some apologetic. I didn't open a single one, because by then I wasn't looking for closure. I wasn't looking for anything. I had already walked through the fire, and I didn't plan on turning around. I didn't seek revenge. I sought clarity. I bought a new house, left no forwarding address, and changed my number. Peace became the prize. I joined a nonprofit that helps men navigate emotional trauma and divorce. I told my story not to shame her, but to show others what survival looked like. I wasn't the bitter man the internet wanted. I was just done. Done making excuses for someone who never hesitated to lie. Haley kept reaching out through mutual friends. She tried once to show up at my office. Security escorted her out. Her spiral wasn't my story anymore. I didn't watch it happen. I didn't need to. I built something better without her. I healed without drama, without noise. And when I finally stood in front of a crowd, telling them how I rebuilt from betrayal, I felt it quiet, grounded, free. My chapter with Haley wasn't revenge. It was responsibility. For myself.